Oh my, I didn't know what it means to believe. Oh my, I didn't know what it means to believe.
All right, great to be here. My favorite thing about Australia is that no one thinks that I'm Australian. Everyone knows that I'm not Australian. In America, everyone thinks that I'm Australian. Oh, are you Australian? No, I'm not Australian. I lived in Georgia for 2 years, and 25 years of England plus 2 years living in Georgia. I guess I get confused with being Australian. Look, I really appreciate all of you guys coming out here and being here today. It's a beautiful day in Sydney. I really hope that the seeds that are planted here today end up, creating massive change in Australian medicine. We need it here. We need it all around the world. And what I wanted to do, first thing here today is just sort of lay a picture of where we are. I know that, just as Penny said, there are different definitions here of what I'm going to sort of try and define what I mean by certain words, so that you can understand what I mean by functional medicine, what I mean by integrated medicine. We can get on the same page. While we start, I don't really know the group here, and I'd really love to know who's represented. So how many physicians do we have in the room? GPs, okay, so about half physicians, and then the rest naturopaths. Got some naturopaths and some other types of providers that are non. Do you want to just shout out, let me know what you guys do? Psychologist? Okay, health coaches? Okay, student? Yeah. Functional. Okay, good. We got a good squad. Look, I'm really excited to share this with you. So the first thing I'm going to start with is we're going to talk about stuff that's not related to integrated medicine at all, but this thing is called the future of medicine. So I just want to give you an idea of what's happening in America, because a lot of times, I think we're behind a little bit here on what's happening in America, integrated functional, but the world is happening outside of our little module too. So this is a new company called Parsley Health. It launched 2 weeks ago on the back of a study. It's basically a type 2 diabetes specialty clinic. And while we're all arguing over what diet is the healthiest for type 2 diabetes, they're just doing it. They're not asking for anyone's permission. They're not, hoping that the government will do something to help them. They've raised $37 million, and in their initial trial with reversing type 2 diabetes, 87% of patients reduced or eliminated their insulin. 56% of patients reduced their HbA1c below diabetic level, and 12% weight loss at 6 months. So this is happening, right? Reversal of type 2 diabetes, it's not even something that was in our zone. Like, it's in kind of our zone in integrative, and that I'm sure all of you have examples of changing people's diets significantly and seeing their insulin go down or even getting off insulin. You got Dr. Rangan Chatterjee doing BBC Doctor in the House in the UK and showing people getting off insulin in 30 days, and everyone's like, wow, I didn't know that medicine could do that. And people don't know medicine can do that, but is it going to be integrative functional medicine that's going to sort of claim that? Or is it just going to be other people who asked? I've been saying for the last 3 years on the functional forum is like, the biggest thing that I see holding back integrated medicine is just a history of being pushed down by the man. It's this inferiority complex that, like, that's the real medicine, and we're like the weird bastard child, right? And that we can't stand confidently in our place of being the future of medicine. So there are other people that don't think like that, and they just go on and raise money and do the training and get these kind of results. And my hope is that by sharing this with you, what you're going to see is that this is available to us. And we may not have to keep asking for permission. We may just have to go and do it, because the medical powers that be don't know anything about this and are struggling. And so, but there are organizations that are just moving forward. And I wouldn't even call this integrated medicine. It's health coaching. It's ketogenic diets. It's whatever it is. But it's happening, and it's working, and it's real. And as we go through this, I want to show you that there's an opportunity for us in Australia to innovate and create the health centre of the future, or you can just wait 5 years and be an employee of Parsley Health. That's up to you. But now is the time where people are realizing that things in medicine are possible that were not possible before, and now the eyes are opened, and it's like, who's going to take advantage of that? Is it the community that had the heart of integrated medicine all along, or is it just the people with Silicon Valley with the most money that can create structures where you'll end up being Uber drivers? That's really the conversation. Forward. So Forward is not really integrated medicine either, but it opened in San Francisco. It's a ridiculously tech-enabled practice. So it's a physical location. This is kind of what it looks like. You've got this big screen. They're doing all the tech stuff up there. Doctors, AI, and doctors working together to manage your health. Personalized plan built from your data and devices. A staff of doctors with world-class backgrounds. Again, it's not integrated medicine, but it smells a little bit like it, right? We're using data, we're getting in there, we're reversing your diseases, we're predicting health or otherwise. This is happening too. So this is called Forward. It's $149 a month. You pay every month, and you have access to a doctor in this like seriously tech-enabled environment in San Francisco. This is like a few months old. Now we'll look into the slightly more integrative world. So there's a new term called scientific wellness that you all need to know about, because I think it's going to be a term that's going to share. Again, Aravel, $37 million they've raised too. It's by the guy, we'll talk about the guy a bit later here, the Institute for Systems Biology. But Aravel has no doctors at all. All you have is technology, so you get your genes tested, you get a Fitbit, you get given all this gear, it's like $2,000, $3,000, and you have a coach. So you have technology and coach. Now, the people that started this are all involved with this big medical system called Providence, and it's all connected so they can see that they're going to connect doctors into it. But at the moment, it's not really medical, but it really is medical, because again, the same thing's happening, reversing diseases. But in this case, there's no doctor at all. It's a coach and the technology. The path to wellness isn't a secret, it's a science. It sounds like something that one of your clinics might be the tagline for, but there's no doctors at all. And then one that you might be a bit more familiar with, because they've been on the functional forum, is Parsley Health. So Parsley Health now in 3 locations. This is my friend Dr. Robin Berzin who started it. Started in New York, now it's in 3 different places. Functional medicine, $150 a month. No phone number for the clinic, right? So they operate. I'm getting all these calls now from practitioners who read the book being like, I really want to get rid of my phone number. My phone number is so annoying. How do I get rid of my phone number? And we can, talk about that, because this one doctor I was speaking to the other day has become well known for PRP injections. And so people just call the office to have a 30-minute conversation with the front desk person about what PRP is. They could just Google it, but they want to speak to a person. And so like the front desk is so jammed up, and the people who want to book appointments can't get through, and it's a mess. And so, Robin set it up in the way that the only way you interact with them is via email. You have to become a member. You can't have a one-off appointment, and you have ongoing revenue stream because it's $150 a month, and the incentives line up in the right direction, because if you have a membership and you get people well and they don't come in and use and they keep paying, it's good for them because they're well, and it's good for you because you're getting money without doing anything, and then you can scale up and build a practice. And we're going to talk about these membership models as we go along. So I just wanted to start today by sharing with you that there are a lot of people that are looking at medicine and realizing there's a sea change occurring. The number 1 response of people to my book was doctors, but then the number 2 was entrepreneurs reading it, because entrepreneurs know that when there's a dramatic shift in the way that we understand health, or if there's a dramatic shift in any business, that there's a massive opportunity. And there's a massive opportunity now to be the leaders in this new era of health. That's what we're going to talk about today. And whether or not the integrative doctor ends up at the center of that is kind of up to the integrative doctor and up to all of you guys in the room. And what I would hope would happen is that you guys would be so jazzed by today, so fired up with what you've learned, so the information would be that actionable that you could go back, build these centers of the future. Everyone would sort of know who was here, and they can see, oh wow, he's doing it, she's doing it, whatever. Byron Bay's rocking it, Sydney's doing it, everyone's making it happen. And then, that would be a catalyst for this next era where the doctors in Australia would see, okay, who's the happiest, healthiest doctor that we see out there who's really enjoying their practice? It's this community, and it causes more and more doctors to want to come and practice in this way. And that, that there'll be the creation of technology that can build it all together. So this is just the first few. The way that I think medicine is moving, and this is, Trump Care just got voted down today, right? You saw that. But yeah, so Trump Care is not going to be voted on because they haven't got the votes to put it through. But whether you're Obamacare or Trump Care, or whether you're the Functional Medicine Center at the Cleveland Clinic, or whether you're, any payer in the world, there's this new equation that they're looking at, which is value-based care. And what I'm here to tell you today is that the scientific double-blind placebo study is not going to be the future way in which people are going to decide what to do. It's going to be based on value. And with value is the outcomes divided by the cost. The outcomes divided by the cost. And I, at one point in my life, was a bit of a maths geek. I was hired into work for an investment bank because I was a maths geek. And as a maths geek, I can tell you that you want this, if you want high value, you want this to be really high, and you want this to be really low. And the lower that this is, the bigger this is, even if this stays the same. And so, one of the cultures that I see as a shift that's happening right now in America is in the first era of functional medicine or integrated medicine, doctors had a moral obligation to practice this type of medicine. They felt it. They realized, okay, I'm going to have to go and just work out how to make this happen. And they worked it out. And some doctors, would see your clinic time, your supplements, your labs, all as profit centers, and would try and make money off all of them. Some would decide, well, I'm not going to make money off labs because I don't think that's the right thing to do, and I'm just going to make money off supplements. Some people chose to tell the patients that there was 100% markup on supplements. Some people didn't. Some people, it was like, oh, I'll reduce the price of the entry to come and see me because I know I'm going to sell you the supplements. And people were just trying to work out, how to make money in this because it was new, right? No one had ever sat with a patient for an hour before. No one, there'd been a history of private practice, but you were probably still billing insurance or otherwise. And so, what I'm here to tell you today is that if you really etch this into your mind, I think that there's plenty of way that we can over-deliver as a community in value through outcomes, particularly through behavior change, and we're going to talk about that today, and also through minimizing costs, because the culture shift that I'm seeing is, in America, we're seeing this sort of, there's a movement towards direct primary care where you're paying a monthly membership fee. But the culture of that, no matter how you're paying for it, the culture is, I'm here as a physician and I'm a trusted resource and I'm going to help you save money. I'm going to help the person in front of me save money. Now, that's an interesting dialogue when, if you saw Jeff Glad on the forum last week, the conversation has always been, well, look, if you invest in me now, you're going to save money down the line. And that's an equation that I know a lot of practitioners have communicated to patients, like, hey, invest in this, these services now, and then down the road, I'll be able to save you money. But what's happening now, the new culture, I feel, is like, I'm going to save you money now and down the road and forever because I'm on your team. And there's a history in, there's an opportunity to have a really honest relationship with the patient that is not really likely in a third-party payer system where all the prices are opaque and no one knows really what's going on and the patient's just trying to make their way through the system and they don't really know. I think that's going to play really well for us. I think we're an honest community. I think the people that made it into this space at this point did it because of a moral obligation that they're doing the right medicine. In some cases to their own detriment financially, right? Just because they were like, I've got to do this. I know that this works. I want to try and work it out. And all of the people in the room here have been doing this for a long time, in some cases for decades. You had to just work it out as you went along. And that's because there wasn't a lot of guidance. And I feel like one of the things that I wanted to do with the Functional Forum, what we've been able to do is just look out and see, look, where is innovation happening that's good for our community, that fits with the values of why we're all here, and share it so that we can all speed up the speed of connection. So I want you to ingrain this into your mind throughout the whole day, because a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is how do we create better value in the system. And it's going to be through a lot of the things that we talk about here today. PCs, who knew? All right, so just a bit of background about me and how I sort of got in this space. So I was the weird kid at school that did integrated medicine. I had a homeopath, I had a chiropractor. No one in England knew what that was. My mum somehow predicted antibiotic resistance by 30 years, even though she, like me, has no medical training, but I was the only kid in school that was not allowed to be given antibiotics, unless, I had permission from her. And that was just, I think, an understanding of when you get into this mindset, you understand holism, you understand that fishing with dynamite might get you a lot of fish, but it's going to kill a lot of other things. So I thought I needed to be an investment banker, had a rebellious phase, moved to America, and the first clinic that I worked in was called the Spa on Green Street. The Spa on Green Street to this day, it's beautiful. It's in the rural Georgia. So this is like, I don't know what the equivalent is in Australia, but it's like southern, and it's rural, and it's rednecky, kind of. Definitely, actually, not kind of. But yeah, so the thing about this bill, and the reason why this is relevant, is because the spa industry worked out how to run the cash practice 10 years before medicine, right? So the spa industry knew how to work with independent contractors, how to get people to rebook, how to get people to buy the supplements, all that stuff. They had that down. So I walked into that practice. The most valuable thing in that whole building was the operations manual that was this thick. Because every new patient, every new person that came in, new front desk person, new independent contractor was trained. There were systems for getting the best out of every person. And I saw this ran really well. And so then I became a sales rep for a supplement company called Energetics. And I just got thrown into the fray of realized that no one else had this down. Everyone else was just trying to do the right thing. But I visited every kind of practice, from the Reiki person doing it, in their basement, right through to the specialist in the hospital who'd heard the word integrative but didn't know what it was, and certainly didn't know why I was there. And so, I had that opportunity, and basically what I worked out is that if I helped them with the non-clinical stuff, then I said, look, I'll help you with the practice running, but you've got to buy my stuff. Then I started speaking at this conference called Heal Thy Practice, and big shout out to Eric and Meg who put this on. This really gave me the opportunity for the first time to stand in front of groups of doctors and hear what was going on. So these conferences were all about the non-clinical aspects, and it was really focused on how do you, doctors who want to switch into integrated medicine and functional medicine, how do they do it? The clinical and the practical side, and that's where I met people like Jeff Glad, Shilpa Saxena, David Perlmutter, all the people that ended up coming on the show was because I spoke at this conference 4 years in a row. And that's also where I realized that, most other people who were speaking to doctors was ridiculously dry. And if you could make it interesting, then maybe people would want to watch it rather than be forced to watch it for CME. And thanks everyone who's coming here today. So then we started the Functional Forum. It started as a meetup group for doctors in New York. We realized that more than anything, one thing I heard going to all these practitioners is the doctors felt really isolated, particularly integrated medicine doctors felt really isolated, and that, if we could bring them together, there was going to be some value. So we started it in New York, we put on this show, and, it grew. And then this guy, Jeff Glad, who I had met at Heal Thy Practice, came on, and this was, he talked on the 4th ever Functional Forum. So the 4th ever Functional Forum in May 2014 was incredible for two things. One, most people remember it as where Mark Hyman came on and said, hey, the Cleveland Clinic is betting on functional medicine. They're going to open a functional medicine center in the Cleveland Clinic. And that was a great moment. That was the first time that most people knew that had happened. But the thing is about that, I can't really do anything to help that, right? I can cheer from the side, and I can hope that it goes really well, and I can hope that they're getting it right, and they're going to get good results, and they're going to show value-based care. But we couldn't really do anything to support that apart from say, hey, look at this, isn't it great? On the same night, Jeff Glad spoke, and he talked about integrated medicine 2.0, creating the integrated medical home. And what he saw was that in rural Indiana, or in Indiana where he's from, in a not very economically evolved area, he was able to deliver integrated medicine to the community by really kicking ass and just being that solution locally. Now he has 2 nurse practitioners, he has nutritionists, he has health coaches, and his practice is in a tiny little strip mall. And it's not fancy, but this was where we came up with. It was his idea of the micro practice. It's like, how do we get physicians to go from 0 to 1? I love the macro practice, and I'm so glad that there are so many people building the macro practice. But one of the things that I saw was that if you're a doctor and you're thinking, you feel that moral responsibility to go and practice this medicine, and all you see around you are macro practices, you might think that that's the only way to deliver it. And then you might be scared from actually taking the jump, because you're like, I don't have enough capital to buy a building of that size. And I certainly don't have any idea about how to work with these independent contractors. And I certainly don't have any idea about how to manage an acupuncturist practice. Or all of these doubts come into your mind. But what you never saw was that 5 years before the macro practice, it was just one room with one person. Right? And then as they grew and got more confident, it grew. So that's where we said, look, we can help. And Jeff showed on the screen, it was really awesome, showed the progression of farmers markets in America. And he showed that, like, it's the same thing in medicine. People realize they come to an understanding that there's too many people between you and the doctor. There's the insurance guy, there's the admin guy, there's the, case manager person. All these people were irrelevant to the care, and actually were just adding to the cost and not really doing anything. And I want to look the doctor right in the eye, like I want to look the farmer right in the eye, and I want to get his potatoes or his vegetables, because I want to have a real relationship with the person creating my food. I want to cut out all the middlemen. And that's what Jeff had done with his practice. And I was like, okay, here's something that we can do. So then, soon after that, we set our mission, which was 100,000 micro practices, a new primary care network, and that's what we've been working towards ever since. So we did the Evolution of Medicine Summit. We did 2 of them, to talk about the evolution of medicine. I was sure at the beginning that medicine was going to adapt and evolve, right? That medicine was changing. There was... it's working. All right, so yeah, the medicine was going to just adapt and evolve. You're going to see a different type of care. There was a different type of diseases, and medicine was going to adapt. And what I didn't realize, and what I sort of realized halfway between the first and the second summit, is that the systems that were needed for helping acute disease, which the whole medical system had been built around, and the systems needed for chronic disease, which were what were needed, were not going to adapt one into another, because they weren't 20% different. They were like fundamentally opposite, right? One is reactive. It all starts when something happens. You put the most expensive provider into the line with the patient first, right? Why do you start care with the doctor? Why is it that you go straight to meet the doctor? Because in acute care, you need to have the best diagnostician on the ground straight away to work out what's going on. If someone's had type 2 diabetes for 4 years and wants to reverse it, is that necessary? Maybe not. Right? Maybe not to have the diagnosis, because they know what they have, right? They don't need a new diagnosis. They need to facilitate behavior change. So, you start to see that, like, how is this going to happen? And so that's why we started to think about, okay, healthcare from scratch. From scratch, what would it look like? And I would argue that that same conversation is what's happening with Forward and with Verta and all the things you saw earlier. It's like, if we were going to start from scratch, how would we do it? I still think that when doctors are coming up with the ideas of how to do it, it's been military training into you in the way that it's, the way that medicine is meant to be. And so there's ideas that I've seen come up with by non-doctors that are a little bit different, but I think are more designed for the new types of diseases that we have. And then this was last year, so we had the functional forum. We went to Stuttgart, and it was a conglomeration of all of these groups: AIHM, DAMID, which is the German anthroposophical medicine, IFM, Eurocam, all these groups together. And I can tell you, the level of confidence in the integrated medicine worldwide is shockingly low, shockingly low. When Mimi Guarneri got up there, maybe this is an American thing, and just talked about the science of connection, it was awesome, it was really well indexed and had lots of science. I think everyone's absolutely petrified of their medical boards and everywhere. And people think, oh, in Germany they're doing it right. They're not, right? In one hospital, maybe in the Filder clinic, where it's a Rudolf Steiner clinic for like 100 years, there's a confidence there, and they get amazing results. And they have ridiculously low levels of C-sections and infections, and it's incredible to see, but that's one clinic. Generally, it's not happening in the way that you think. But the biggest thing that I took away from there is that there's no one with a plan somewhere else that's working out, and we're just going to be able to follow that plan, right? We're going to have to do it ourselves. We're going to have to probably take some wrong turns in the meantime while we're working things out, but that's part of entrepreneurship, and that's part of like learning and failing forward. And if we actually act as a community, we can learn from each other's failures, and everyone can move forward more quickly. And that's really what we try to set up. So I did the book. Last year, with the Functional Forum, our goal was to reduce the barriers to entry to functional medicine so that any doctor anywhere in the world could find out about functional medicine without having to go to a conference. They could just learn about it online. And then the goal with the book was to give the model for the micro practice to everyone online. Because the biggest thing with medicine is getting people from 0 to 1, right? There's a lot of training and education that you can take to make yourself an even better functional medicine doctor, even better integrated medicine doctor. But it's that journey from 0 to 1 where you're no kind of integrative doctor to just doing it a few days a week or a few hours a week. That first step that you have to take, and that's what we really look to do, and that's why we focused on the micro practice, because what we saw is that practitioners were able to basically now, in America anyway, build a practice off a laptop. They didn't need as much stuff. There wasn't a need for as many things as you needed before, and a lot of technologies were popping up to need even less, even like with supplements and labs and those kind of things that you don't quite have here yet, but maybe is coming. So this is a digital health guy, Eric Topol. He wrote the book, The Patient Will See You Now. And, this is not a functional medicine guy at all. This is not an integrated medicine guy at all. But he says there'll be titanic changes ahead. Medicine can and will be rebooted and reinvented one individual at a time. So, again, there's this convergence occurring where from many different areas, from the cost angle and value-based care, from like integrated medicine, having more science and people realizing this is kind of real, technology coming in, you got wide swathes of people now tracking their outcomes on their phone and they've got their Fitbit and whatever. All of these things are coming together. There's a new type of medicine and it looks very, very, very close to the integrated medicine. But I think that this is our opportunity there's an opportunity happening now where many more people are realizing that the old systems of chronic disease management are just not very well, they're just not intuitive. I give the example of Uber because I use it a lot now, even though I probably should delete it, but I understand that. If you've always used cabs and then you use Uber, there's something that happens where you think, wow, that was so efficient and that was so intuitive that I could see where the car was going, it knew where I was, it took me where I wanted to go, I didn't have to speak to the driver, there's no chance that the driver didn't know where to go, there's no chance that the driver didn't know where to pick me up. Like, it's just so intuitive with the way that it should be that it's very difficult to go back to just going in a cab, right? Because where is he? Is he here? Does he know the address? What is the address? Like, all of these things are that. I have a feeling that if we can have as many people as possible to have an experience with integrative and functional medicine in that same way, the operating system just makes sense, right? It's an intuitive way. Oh yeah, I never really understood how the body degrades over time. And if my hemoglobin A1C is this and it's just below the number and I don't have diabetes, and then it goes a little bit further and I do, that's not that big a change. It shouldn't be like a 0 to 1, no diabetes. There's some sort of spectrum here. People get that. People understand that. Like, this is a very intuitive type of medicine that we're practicing, because people understand, okay, the body degrades over time. It doesn't just happen. And what my goal is and what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you all of the different ways that we can give as many people as possible an opportunity to experience that at the lowest cost possible, because we care about value-based care, and that if we can set up the systems to do that, you will have a full practice forever, because you will have added value to a whole community of people in a really transformative way that then they would only ever consider coming to you for care because of the value that you offered. That's what I want to do today. I want to share not just what's working here. We're going to hear from people in Australia who are starting to put it together. And hopefully what I want all of you to leave with is the confidence to go and to initiate something. Initiative can't be given. It can only be taken. So I can do my role here to be able to, to set it up and answer whatever questions you have. But I would just say, if by lunchtime you don't have any idea of what you're going to do next, right? If by lunchtime you don't have a clear idea of what 4 or 5 action steps are in front of you, come and see me at lunchtime, because we've got the whole afternoon and I want to identify people so that by the end of this, everyone has a clear starting point of where they're going. And if we do that today and you guys go out, do things, make it happen, what we'll see is that there'll be a knock-on effect, and we'll see really big movement forward. So if you speak to all of these people, there's this concept of preventive, predictive, personalized, participatory medicine, P4 medicine. And this is the guy, Leroy Hood, who's the Institute for Systems Biology. They're also the people behind Aravel, which is the scientific wellness that you saw earlier. So, I think we can all think that integrative medicine is definitely preventive, right? It's definitely predictive. If you're doing the right test, you can see, okay, if they've got a hemoglobin A1C of 6.5 or whatever, you're getting towards a disease that you don't have yet. In this gap between health and disease, there's this dysfunction gap, and you can identify where people are in that and help them get back in the other direction. It's definitely personalized, right? We're teaching, going with the person before, and it's participatory. These three are pretty solid. This one is interesting because this one is a fundamental realignment of who the most important person in the medical relationship is, right? It used to be the doctor. In the acute disease, it makes a lot of doctor. You've got the pills, you've got the answers, you've got the training. The patient is there to take what you've got. In this new P4 medicine, the patient is the most important part because you can't reverse their type 2 diabetes, but they can, right? They need, if they're going to participate in their care. So it's how do we actually get them to participate? Now, the thing about P4 medicine, it's a great idea, but I was speaking to Jeff Bland the other day, and what word did he use? He said, what did he say? P4 medicine is an aspirational system of medicine, right? We can aspire to be P4 medicine, but we can't do P4 medicine. You want to do it? What are you going to do? What's the first thing to do when they come in? There's no plan here. This is just a good, a nice 4 Ps. Doesn't mean anything. So that's why we need a structure to get us here, and that's why I want to talk about a few things, and I want to define a few things before we go through. So this is how I see the world. And I have no medical training, so I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, the one thing I don't want is if you don't agree with me on this, I know, have you ever had a patient where the patient is kind of waiting for you to say something they don't agree with so they don't have to do anything, right? They're sort of waiting for you to say something they don't agree with, and then eventually they're going to be like, well, I can categorize what just happened in my mind as BS so that I don't have to take responsibility for what he's talking about. Have you ever had that? You can sort of see them waiting. So, nah, I read about that. No, wrong. Yeah, I'll see you next time. Never come back. I don't want that to happen here. If I'm saying functional and you think integrative, or you don't agree with the way that I'm categorizing things, it's okay for us not to agree on the lingo, but I would just say don't let that stand in the way of doing awesome stuff after you leave. What I'm going to say here today is that I think integrative medicine and naturopathic medicine has been a necessary stepping stone towards where we're going, right? To my mind, integrative medicine means we're integrating standard of care and non-standard of care modalities, right? It's the integration of these modalities in practice. And naturopathic medicine, again, similar kind of thing. There's a lot of these non-standard of care modalities that have value. Now, the first thing that had to happen is people had to realize, either through science or their own experience, that these had some value in the system. And I think we've spent the last 50 years showing things like meditation, dietary intervention, all the other things have value. If not to everyone, then a certain segment of the population with a certain type of disease category. What I spoke about in my book and what I want to talk about here is functional medicine. And the reason why is because it's a prioritization of integrated medicine, right? If the goal is to save money, we want to do the minimum input for the maximum output. And I'm sure you've seen over your clinic that in some people you could get them to meditate and it's completely transformational for them. They're just operating straight away at a totally different level because they'd never been introduced to it before. They have a disease category where that sort of brain thinking changes, and it changes their whole outlook, and the patient just flies. And there's some people that you could recommend it for and not really that much happens. Okay, so why is that? Everything's a bell curve. But what I'm here to say, the reason why I like functional medicine, and when I saw the functional medicine matrix from the IFM, I was like, that's it, is because we have to do things the same way. That's my opinion, is that, you could go and sit with the 5 biggest gurus in integrated medicine in the UK and possibly even here in Australia, and what you would see, you spend a day up in Byron with these guys. You spend a day with Penny at her clinic, and what you see, they're not doing it the same. And that's a problem. And the problem is, yes, it's an art and a science, but we're trying to scale up this type of care. And you can't scale up this type of care if you're all doing it differently, right? I can tell you now, Verta Health ain't doing it differently person to person, and Parsley Health ain't doing it differently person to person, and Forward isn't doing it. They have a standard system that they take people through. Now, there's plenty of opportunity for individualization within the system, right? There's a plan to work out what's going on with that individual and then to prioritize it. But if we're not prioritizing the interventions, we might end up doing interventions like meditation on people who aren't going to benefit from it, and therefore the value is actually lower because there's cost, but there's no outcome. The outcome doesn't change and the cost goes up, which means the value goes down. We're getting back to the maths. Remember the maths equation? It's a maths lesson. We're going to be talking about that too. So I just want to put everything in that context. So a reproducible operating system. Now I know that one of the things about this is that it's going to mean the functional medicine's awesome and everything else is not as valuable. Look, do we want to be a unified front taking medicine forward, or do we want to argue? And my feeling is that while we're arguing about what the best thing is to do, other people are going to take over, and the heart of what this could be will be lost. The transformational potential of people like you leading medicine will be lost because we were still arguing about whether the ketogenic diet was good, right? And I think that's an opportunity lost. So when I'm talking about functional medicine and why I think it's the future, there's some standard process that every patient comes through. Through the intake form, you have a way of collecting data of everyone that comes through the process, and through that intaking process, there's a prioritization system to say, okay, this person definitely needs a chiropractic adjustment, right? There is some serious structural integrity problems here, and I can see that it's causing this, this, and this, and I'm going to recommend a chiropractic adjustment to that. Not to everyone, but to this person, because I, as the clinician, have worked out through my intaking that structural integrity is a problem in this person, and therefore I'm going to recommend that. And in that case, I would bet that the chiropractic, whatever it's called, what's it called? Manipulation, adjustment, exactly. I had one since I was 5 minutes old, I can't remember. It must be the jet lag, but there's that's the value-based care, right? It's giving it to the right person at the right time. So that's what I say with functional medicine, a reproducible operating system that not only you can send every patient through, but we're going to talk about integrative teams later, that the doctor, the naturopath, the coach, and whoever else is on the team can speak that language, and the patient. Right? If we want participatory medicine, it's the most important that the patient can speak that language, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to be doing the work, right? And that matrix that IFM makes is really, it's like Uber in my mind. It's like, oh yeah, when I show people, and I've got it on my phone, does this intuitively make sense to you, a 7-sided shape where you can see, how your health is, in 7 different ways? They're like, yeah, I love that. That makes sense to people, right? So imagine if we had a language we could get everyone to follow, that they would actually do things and then everyone in the team could communicate. It seems to me that's a priority. All right, coaching. We need coaches, right? Coaches are awesome because if you go back to the maths equation, the best way that we can deliver outcomes is from behavior change, and the health coach is typically cost less than the doctor. So again, this maths equation, the top is higher and the bottom is lower. In America, you see some clinics where like the health coach is making, and these numbers could be different, but let's say $60,000 a year. That's $30 an hour if you divide by 2,000 hours in a year. So $30 an hour for a health coach versus some of the doctors are booking at $300 an hour. That's a 10x differential. The doctor has to be 10 times better at facilitating change to get the same value. The value of the health coach is much higher. And now why we're seeing in these most progressive clinics, the coach doing the intake. Why do you need the doctor to do the intake if you're doing the same intake for everyone, right? Does the most expensive provider need to be the first person there because the cost is way higher? So when you start to understand that math differential, you start to see if there's ways that you can reduce costs significantly, the value is higher. And my feeling is that if we can all deliver really exceptionally valued care in our clinics, the only way it's going to go is up. You're going to get more patients. They're going to have a amazing experience that's going to grow. Community. So this is the third prong. So the reason why this is important, we're going to talk a lot about this, is community is taking advantage of peer-to-peer. And why is that so important? Because it's basically free, right? So the number on the bottom of the thing over here with value-based care goes up a hell of a lot. If you have 0 on the bottom, it's actually infinity. The value is infinity over here. Maths James coming through again. I knew my education was worth something. So these are the things I'm thinking about. If we can bring in a lot more community, if we can facilitate peer-to-peer transactions, value goes up all the way through the equation. All right, so remember the equation. We're going to be talking about this today. But just think about how we can get better outcomes at lower cost, or same outcomes at lower cost, or same cost, better outcomes. All of it end up with better value. But if better outcomes at lower cost, that's the value of transaction right there. So I talked a little bit about this in the, I know Marcus listened this week, but anyone else listen to the webinar that I did on Monday? Okay, good. No one else. So it'll be fresh for everyone apart from Marcus. But look, this was from the Institute for Functional Medicine 2 years ago. For the first time ever, they can measure what's going on inside the cell. And they can see how the cells are either expressing genes or not expressing genes. And we're super focused, aren't we, on physical inactivity, alcohol, smoking, even nutrition as the things that we really focus on. But high social stress is the biggest driver of chronic disease-related mortality. And so far, you can even see this even further, that as levels of social integration increase, age-adjusted mortality rate decreases across Eastern Finland, Alameda County, Gothenburg, all worldwide. These are all studies plotted together, and you see that as social integration increases, adjusted mortality rate decreases. So this is showing that this is something that we can do something about. But again, so these are some stats. 1 in 5 people are lonely. I'm not sure if it's the same in America. I think it's worse here. I've got a friend who works in mental health and meditation, and I think suicide is really high in Australia, isn't it? Right? Yeah, it is. So this is happening right here. Loneliness is dangerous as smoking cigarettes. Women, people with the fewest social ties are 3 times more likely to have died over a 9-year period. Women with epithelial ovarian cancer observed over 7 years. The best predictor of longevity is social connections. Women who were connected, 64% compared to 26% of women who were isolated. So that's a massive increase there. This is the big one: targeted rejection. Right, this is targeted rejection events or experiences where someone breaks up with you, you're fired, or where there's a very clear intention to break the social bond. The risk factor for depression following this experience is increased by 21x over baseline. I was asking at lunch yesterday, what kind of food would you have to eat? What kind of diet would you have to eat for how long to have a 21x increase in depression? Right? You saw Morgan Spurlock when he ate McDonald's for 30 days. Was that a 5x? Was that a 6x? That's a lot. Like 2x is a lot. 2x is a lot. 21x is a lot. A real lot. Like you're probably going to have to just eat just the bread in McDonald's for 3 months to get that. And yet one moment of targeted rejection, getting fired from your job or breaking up with a loved one, causes that. That's a really significant thing. And the other thing to think about when you look at all these, look at all the different journals that this pops up in. Psychological science, oncology, whatever. So where else do we see this? If you followed what I talked about for a long time, in the blue zones, at the micro level, we can see it. At the very smallest level, in the macro level, we see it in the blue zone. So we see these Costa Rica, perfect environment, beautiful environment, not the same level of smog. So you think, oh, maybe it's the level of smog. We got smog in Sydney, we can't do it. You haven't been to Loma Linda, California. I live really close to there. It's smoggy AF. Because it's in Los Angeles, but yeah, it's all about the community in all these different places and you can see why, right? You can see why because of it. I talked about this the other day, Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, but Rosetta, Pennsylvania, if you read the book, same diet as the people around, but they had the lowest levels of heart disease in 1950, where heart disease was out of control. And it was basically because they had this tight Italian community. And as soon as the next generation Americanized, the numbers normalized. I hate saying normalized because it's a new normal. It's not the real normal, right? But this is the way that it's going. So, what's the mechanism? Human social genomics. Central to human social genomics is the fact that social environment conditions, especially our subjective perceptions of those conditions, can reach deep inside the body to regulate the expression of a broad set of genes or gene profiles. I was hearing early this morning that genetic testing was big in Australia. Everyone jumped on it. All the doctors were doing it, and they were like, oh, look at this SNP, look at that SNP. You got to turn it on by your food, turn it off on your food. Food is nothing compared to the way that people perceive their own stress or otherwise, how they're connected, the interconnection. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is, do you have patients that have this issue? Is it on your intake form? What are the best questions to get into it? And do you have time to get into it? Have you set up a system in your clinic where you have the time to spend with people? And not you, but someone. Right? It doesn't have to be you. It could be a lower price provider whose specialist is in that work. It could be another community member, peer-to-peer transaction, and then there's no cost, but there's tons of value being delivered. I love this quote. I heard it this week. Being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they're almost indistinguishable, right? So how do we create a structure where people can be heard and not at $300 an hour? Right? Because then you're putting into place a barrier. If it costs me $300 an hour to be heard, it's not going to happen for most people. So the question we have to ask is, who's going to solve this problem, right? Who is going to solve the problem of social isolation in medicine? Can hospitals solve this problem? I don't think so. I was speaking at a conference and I was so annoyed when the person said, will hospitals be the centers of new health creation? I kicked the plant off the stage for no other reason for the fact that I wanted people to remember it. Like, there's not a lot of health happening in hospitals, health creation, right? There's a lot of disease treatment, but you've got fluorescent lighting. Everyone hates their job. It's microbiome minimized. Like, all the things that can create health are not happening there. So why are we expecting that this is going to be solved by them? Or not even expecting, but just thinking that that's the likely solution. It can't be solved by pharma either, right? Pharma cannot solve the problem of social isolation through drugs. They tried. It's not working. You know, it's called a benzodiazepine. So the hardest thing to do is react. The second easiest thing to do is respond. The hardest thing to do is initiate. I think, and what we're going to talk about today, is that if we can build low overhead structures of practice that are really focused on building communities of patients, giving them an interaction with your clinic that's transformational, that happens in a group structure that's low cost, it solves two problems in one go. One is the marketing of your practice. Some people have told me that marketing is a problem for most integrated practitioners, that you want to get more people in, and we're going to talk about how to do that in a way here shortly. Some people have told me that as soon as you open your shingle as a functional medicine or integrated medicine GP, you're flooded with people because everyone's looking for this and there's no one doing it. So I've heard two different stories of that, but ultimately it doesn't matter. What we're looking to do is to create opportunities for everyone in society to have a transformative experience with integrated medicine. For just the economic realities of the way things are, that cannot happen in a one-on-one environment with the most expensive provider. There's not enough providers. There's not enough time. There's way too many people that need this. So what we're going to talk about today is how to build the lowest overhead possible practice, to build the biggest possible community around that practice so that we can solve those two things. And the biggest thing that we're going to solve is we're going to introduce people who want to get healthy to each other. Because if you're the person that facilitates that introduction, there's value for both people, and there's a lot of value for you, and the cost is zero. The cost is zero, and that's the future of value-based care. So are there examples in integrated medicine? Hopefully you guys have heard of the Daniel Plan, you know, Mark Hyman and Rick Warren. You take healthy behaviors. If you guys don't know, 15,000 person population, 250,000 pounds lost. They take advantage of an existing social structure, which is a church. The 15,000, I mean, God knows what a church of 15,000 people looks like. I mean, how many people fit in the Telstra Stadium, right? You know, you've got 15,000 people, there's 3,000 groups of 5 meeting on a Wednesday. You facilitate, you add healthy behaviors into community structures that already exist, and you have totally transformational things. And I'm going to talk about today ways that the integrative medicine provider can position themselves less as a provider and more as an activist to connect with pre-existing communities so that you can start to connect your practice to those communities and create transformational change much more quickly. Community is truly the guru of the future. And what is a community? So I've spoken about Charles Eisenstein a lot. If you haven't watched his keynote that we had on the Functional Forum, well, actually it wasn't on the Functional Forum, but it's on the YouTube channel. He says community is a group of people bounded together by gifts and stories. Now, the question I have to ask you guys is this a community? Right? There's the potential of a community, right? Because we all share the same story, is that integrated medicine is the future, it's what we want to do or otherwise. But that gift is the next thing that we need to talk about. Are there gifts that you guys give to each other? You're giving me a great gift and you're giving AIMA a great gift by showing up today. And I really appreciate it. And it's the beginning of something transformational. But I really want to talk about gifts and stories because the story and the gift of building community in your area where you are is a gift that you can use to be the center and create that community. So just a shout out, I know most people are here from Sydney, people from Byron, but the first thing that we wanted to do, the first thing that we did at the Functional Forum was to facilitate communities of practitioners, to reduce social isolation within the practitioner community. Physician, heal thyself, right? To introduce providers, the coaches, the doctors, and the other providers, to introduce them to each other so they could create these health centers of the future with them all working together. So, I would love to see the continued growth of the meetup groups. I would love to see, we created to be supplement independent so that Metagenics and bioceuticals and all the other people who make the most money from getting you in groups together could facilitate it and pay for it, essentially. And I would love to see in Sydney here, it could be North Beaches meetup and this meetup and Redfern meetup or otherwise, just people getting together and learning. And the way that the Functional Forum is going to move is going to be less about you sitting there and watching James on the TV and more about you guys as a community deciding what you want and self-actualizing what you want out of that community. The first thing we had to do is get you into a room together. You guys can work out what you want out of the group. It might be different from one group to another, but it's going to be less about, one of our core principles at the Evolution of Medicine is actually giving the groups themselves their own autonomy to decide what they want out of that group. And so that's the beauty of what we're trying to set up. So that's the end of the first session. The whole point of this was to give you an idea of the way that I see the opportunity in front of us, to see some of the players that are they're innovating in this space. After the break, we're going to talk about the foundations of the micro practice, how to build a practice at the lowest possible cost, and how to build a structure of community around your practice so that you can guarantee new patient acquisition and you can give as many people in your community an opportunity to integrate with integrated medicine and have a transformative experience. That's it.